go into any Sumerian exhibit and see what I'm about to tell you. Drawings of rockets that look like Apollo launching into the sky. Etchings and sculptures of men in spacesuits and what looked like oxygen masks. And this artwork was created in the 4th millennium BCE, 4,000 years before Christ walked the earth. Genesis, Noah's Ark, to name a few. Both of these stories existed in Sumer 6,000 years before the Bible was written. Genesis came from the Sumerian epic of creation. Noah's Ark came from the Sumerian deluge. The alien god legend has its basis, its origins in Sumerian history. You can find everything I've described in a museum right now.
Ourselves here, a few little minority that know about the bigger picture. Myself, I'm not an expert on the subject, but it's something that's fascinated me for like 20 years. And if someone said that I'd be standing up in front of a bunch of people speaking, I would have told them they're crazy. I'd never be doing that. You know, that's just not the type of person I am. But I just feel that this information is so important, it has to be shared with people, you know. And the more people you share it with, the more people get an understanding of it and slowly break down the barriers between people that divide us all, you know, because all these religions that have been made up over time, because no one really knows the answer to anything, have kept us all divided. And it's dividing us even more so these days. It's just getting more intense. So, I'll begin with the introduction. I've got some video clips. I like to think of myself as more of a presenter than an expert on the subject. I just present the experts, and then so that you can find out about them. You can research the people yourselves. They're really interesting. They've got some amazing stuff to say. That they've spent a whole lifetime researching the subject. So I'm going to present these people to you, and then when you get away from here, you can look them up yourself. So here we got. This is the Grand Ziggurat, or this is in Iraq, and it was renovated by Saddam Hussein, and he actually used this as his military base during the Iraq War. But what happened was, the reason for the invasion was, he didn't just build this to get in. I mean, they had all their camp, all their rooms and stuff in there. They slept in there, they ate in there. They were bringing stuff out. And the Americans knew they were bringing stuff out. They were watching it by satellite. They were watching them taking stuff out of there. So they're like, what's going on there? What's he taking out? One reason to invade Iraq. And when we go further, you'll see that the first place the Americans went to when they invaded Iraq was they went straight to the National Museum. They made a beeline to the National Museum. And the Republican Guard were guarding the museum. So why was the Republican Guard, which is Saddam's main guard, guarding the museum? And why did the Americans make a beeline straight to the museum? That was the first battle at the museum. It's crazy. So, can you double click? Get the video.
It's one of these currents of history that won't be denied. The truth is going to come out, and when it does, it's going to be explosive.
So, once we get that out, we will go back and we'll completely reassemble the 20th century, rewrite it in a way, and may have to go back and rewrite a significant portion of the entire last 12,000 years.
This is the greatest story in human history. And the reason it is the greatest story in human history, it is the greatest story of human history.
So that's three guys that, if you go back and research them, they're very, very interesting. They've got a lot to say, they have a lot of knowledge on the subject. Another two they're not with us no more. I just wanted to pay my respects. I think both these guys deserve or should be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, to be honest. You know, when you think about it, a guy like Hitler was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, which is incredible, yeah, but he was, right? Why haven't these two been? They spent their whole life dedicated to finding out the truth. So I'd like to pay my respects to both of them. So, This is our Earth, this is me, with my hand on Australia. The Annunaki called our planet Eridu, meaning home away from home. And they set up a colony in the Tigris Euphrates Valley, which is just by Baghdad, Iraq. And they called it, funnily enough, you've heard this before, Ea Ben. Eden, as in the Garden of Eden. So Ea means earth, and Ben means base. So they set up Earth base. And we're going to go through some stuff, we're going to repeat a few things we have to. We're going to go a little bit off subject, which we have to as well, but we're going to try and stay the course now. Hopefully, I haven't made it too confusing for anyone to follow. If anyone's got any questions, please put up your hand and ask if I've lost you somewhere. But the gist of the story is, I'm going to tell you the gist of the story, and then we're going to just run through everything, go through some videos and stuff, is that our planet Earth, in our solar system, our star is not on its own. It's not a single star. And as we found out, most stars have a companion. Most stars are binary star systems, and we have a companion star, but it's a brown dwarf or a red dwarf, which means it's much, much older than our sun. And that brown dwarf or red dwarf has 7 planets going around it. Now that solar system is on an elliptical orbit with our sun, and it comes around every 3,600 years. And then those planets, either as they come through our solar system, they will miss each other, or one of them hits. Sometimes they hit each other. And what the Sumerian tablets say is, Nibiru there's a planet called Tiamat, hit our Earth a long, long time ago. The waters mingled, and the life was transferred from one planet to another. So that's how life began now. The planets hit each other. Now our asteroid belt, that's been hit by something big. That was a planet at one stage. We don't know how long ago. It could be 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago. But that asteroid belt between Mars and our planet, that was a planet one day. That was hit by something. So when we look at all the catastrophes through time, we can see they're quite secular. They happen they're quite often. They happen quite a lot. And they repeat themselves. So we know something comes through our solar system which causes havoc every 3,600 years. So what I do is, one of my favourite characters is Sherlock Holmes, the fictional character, and I think this phrase he uses, once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. And if you use that rather than Occam's razor, which is what scientists use, Occam's razor means the simplest answer is always the truth. But that is not true. The simplest answer is not always the truth. Sometimes the answer is quite fantastic. So I go by this. So here's the clay tablets. This is what they look like here. I have one here, if you all want to have a look, so you can see what sort of size they are. So that's what sort of size they are, double-sided, so people carry them with them, keep them in their pocket, they can hand them out to other people. They were like books in those days, so look, you can see the writing's quite done with like a little stylus. And the alphabet they used was 400 characters, not like ours. Ours is 26, ours is pretty simple alphabet. Theirs was 400. Very complicated. Okay, click the video, please.
Northern Iraq, 1849. On the eastern bank of the Tigris River, near the city of Mosul, a team of archaeologists from the British Museum discovers thousands of clay tablets containing cuneiform script they believe to have been written by Babylonian priests in the 7th century BC. Among the tablets found were 2 mysterious relics that have become known as the Babylonian star catalogs. According to translations of the ancient text, these tablets describe the precise movements of various celestial bodies, now known as the Zodiac.
We know so much about the history of Babylonia because of the the excavation and deciphering of huge numbers of these cuneiform texts.
So, and this is in Nineveh, this is where they found them when they go into the underground places. The vaults, all these tablets were stored in a library in Nineveh, and the library of Ashurbanipal and his son Sennacherib, they stored all these tablets for us to find one day. And so this tablet here is the one I'm handing around to you. This is the actual one here. This is a picture of the actual one. This is the law tablet. So this is where we get all our common laws from. And it's amazing, all the common laws that they came up with in those days we have today, and it comes from these tablets. This is the Sumerian tablet of creation, and it's also the flood story. Basically, the same story as in the Bible, Noah, except Noah was called Ziusudra, but this predates the Bible by hundreds of thousands of years. And this is a replica of the tablet here, this one here. So it's broken off a bit. You can see they're all sort of pocket-sized, and people can carry them around, they hand them out to each other, you know, they pass them around. This is how the knowledge was passed on, and they had these on cylinder seals, and they rubbed the cylinder seal across the clay, and then they hardened the clay, so they could make loads of copies. So these are the Babylonian star catalogues. You can see here, this is all charting a course to Earth, all this is. And when you translate some of the text on here, it says rocket, rocket, mountain, mountain, high, high, down, down. So it's quite fascinating that they knew those sort of words in those days, because they were obviously talking about flight and coming to Earth. And see this part of the tablet here that's broken off. So here's some more of the clay tablets that they discovered. Some of them were pretty smashed up, so I can't really decipher that too well. Okay, click through again. No, click here.
The Babylonian legend of Enuma Elish dates back to the 7th century BC. The text was first discovered in 1849 by British archaeologist Sir Austin Henry Layard while searching the ruins of the library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh. The story tells of how the first humans were created by an extraterrestrial race known as the Annunaki. In the ancient texts of Sumerian, we have descriptions of these beings descending from the sky called the Annunaki. The term Annunaki means those who from the heavens came. It says, word for word, that these beings descended in flying vehicles from the sky. And we can find not only descriptions of the Annunaki, but also depictions. And we can see them in statues, in carvings. So it's all very interesting to see that those beings looked like modern-day space travelers with weird suits. Some of them wore wristwatches, they had boots on, and helmets, and above all, wings. And they were always described or depicted in floating above some quote-unquote regular people. So the question is, who were the Annunaki? And according to the ancient astronaut hypothesis, they were space travelers who visited Earth in the remote past.
So this is what the Sumerian tablets give us. The first everything from the Annunaki, according to the Sumerians, the first schools were created by the Sumerian civilization. The first writing system, first mathematics hexadecimal system, which is based on the number 60. It's very good for like making very, very small calculations and very, very large calculations. And it's basically the mathematical system you would need to chart your way across the universe. The first laws, the first civilizations, predates everything we know in the Sumerian civilization. The first agricultural plough, irrigation, the wheel, the arch, the pulley, etc. The first alphabet, 400 characters, not 26. So they pretty much gave us everything we know today comes from the Sumerian Empire. And most importantly, what the Annunaki did after a while, they didn't want to mingle with the human slaves anymore, so they appointed priestships and kingships. This was put in place by the Annunaki because they didn't want to be involved with human affairs anymore. So this is where we get our priestships from, our first kingships, and of course slavery and servants, still very much right today, slavery and servants. You know, it hasn't really changed much. Money and trading, that began with them, and of course they, because the majority of the Annunaki were male when they came to the planet. I think it says there was 60 that came here to start with, and then another 600 that came after that. So if you can imagine, these are big men, you know, they are very aggressive race of beings as well. They like, you know, they like their finer things in life, and of course they just took the slave women as their wives, and they took many of them. And it actually says some of the inscriptions. It's very, very detailed about the relationship between the slave women, the human slave women, which would be us, and the Anunnaki males. And Carl Sagan, great scientist, and obviously one of the biggest skeptics you will ever come across. You know, he would disbelieve anything without concrete proof, but he did feel it necessary to write. I feel that the Sumerian civilization is depicted by the descendants of the Sumerians themselves to be of a non-human origin. The relevant legends should be examined carefully. So even he looked at it and thought, there is something here. There's a lot more to this than just a story. So I think that's great coming from someone like Carl Sagan, and for him to put it into his book as well is just brilliant. And then another thing, what I only found this out a while ago, but I didn't realise the Voyager 1 and 2 deep space probes launched by NASA on August 19, September 5, 1977. Of course, headed by Carl Sagan, this was, they put a gold disc on here. This was in the Voyager spacecraft. There's a gold disc, so just in case any alien races find this, they can play the disc if they've got a record player. I don't know what they were thinking by making that. But what's amazing about this is it has every language of the world on here that's spoken today, but it also has the Sumerian language, which has not been spoken for 8,000 years. So why would they put the Sumerian language on this disc if they didn't think there's beings out there that would understand that language, you know? And it's also the first language. So it's the first one you hear, and then it's all the others. So, you know, they know there's something going on here, these scientists at NASA. So this is the SETI program, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Of course, they make it quite public. Yeah, we never find nothing. Yeah, we're always sending out signals. Of course, we're using the most primitive method of communication, the radio telescope. So we're not going to get a signal straight away. You know, the reply is going to be delayed by quite a few years. So this is the signal they sent out. This is a binary code. Some of it I know. I know this bit here is our DNA. I know this bit here is our solar system. This is our radio receiver. I'm not sure about the other bits here. This is us, obviously this is what we look like. Man, we occupy the third planet from the sun, so we count from the sun outwards. And when you look, 27 years later, in England here, 21st of August 2001, we got a reply in the cornfield, and this was made out of like pixelated So it's incredible. There's no way anyone could have done this overnight. It's absolutely impossible. There's no way anyone could do so. There's no way anyone could do this in a week to pixelate everything like the image on the TV. It's just tiny, tiny little dots. So this is what we got. This is the reply. So this is their DNA. This is what they look like. They inhabit the 3rd, 4th and 5th planets of their solar system. They have a smaller sun than ours, so they've got red dwarf or brown dwarf. And they use a different radio receiver. This is obviously highly, highly technical compared to what we're using. So it's just interesting really that you know, they're sending out these signals and then all of a sudden they get a reply, but they just don't take much notice of the reply, you know. And then we have here the creationists. So we've got basically the religions trying to prove that the Earth is 6,000 years old, and we have the Darwinists basically trying to prove that we evolved from apes. So that's the battle that's going on. And then we have, like myself, I'm an interventionist. I think both are wrong. Both these guys are wrong. They both got it wrong. There's so many flaws in everything they say. It doesn't make any sense. Religion, they say we were created by God. How? And then who created God? You know, you can just carry on from there. Right, evolution. So we evolved from, we crawled out some primordial soup, we were a lizard, then we turned into some amphibian, then we moved up into like a little monkey stage, or like a ferret and a monkey, and then turned into like an ape, and then we turned into a human. So that's kind of hard to believe as well, how that happened. It's, you know, it's more transformations than evolution. So here we have 3 major religions, founded by who? Judaism. Anyone know who founded Judaism? No? Christianity? Anyone know who founded Christianity? Anyone has that a guess? Jesus? Good guess, but no. Caesar. Close, Constantine. Constantine founded Christianity, but obviously based on Jesus, yeah? But that was basically founded by Constantine, the Roman Emperor. Islam, founded by who? Muhammad. So here, Judaism. Moses founded Judaism. Christianity was Constantine, and Islam, Muhammad. And Abraham brought the knowledge of the Sumerians to Ur. He brought it from Ur, the Chaldees, here, and he brought the knowledge of the Sumerians to Egypt. And this must have happened after there was a great cataclysm, things went wrong, the civilization broke down, and the last remaining person from that civilization with any knowledge of what had happened in the past was Abraham. And then, of course, that passed down to his son Isaac, and then we have King Solomon, and so on and so on, and it goes down like that. This is the Kaaba stone in Mecca. This is the holy worship site of the Muslim world, the Islam. What this is here, and this is the thing they kiss, it's actually a fragment of a meteorite. It's a black meteorite. So, and what a lot of Muslims don't realise is the Kaaba stone never looked like this. It's been re-renovated time and time again. It was bigger and it was multicoloured, and it was built by Abraham, and it was built 2,000 years before Islam as well, so it's been there a long time. This is the Temple Mount, so with the mosque on it, obviously that's been built on there before, but the Temple Mount was in the old days was a landing pad, built with huge, massive blocks, huge ones, like the ones in Baalbek in Lebanon. Underneath the Temple Mount, there's a tunnel system, massive caves, tunnels, you name it. You can't go in there because obviously it's been claimed as a religious site now. You've got the Jews that want to claim it as a religious site, you've got the Muslims that want to claim it as a religious site, and really this belongs to the world. It doesn't belong to any religion, it belongs to all of us. Everyone should be able to go there and have a look underground, and this is where the Knights Templars, 7 or 9 of them, I can't fucking recall, they went there and they dug there for 7 years and they found the ancient knowledge that was placed there by Abraham and Isaac and stuff. They left it there, and the Knights Templars found it. They found the ancient knowledge. And all roads lead to Zuma. It's true, everything leads back to Zuma. You can trace everything we have today, you can trace back to Zuma. Kingship, priestships, laws, everything. So the knowledge of ancient Egypt, of ancient Sumerian, was carried into Egypt by Abraham from Ur to build the great dynasties there. Moses carried this knowledge to Palestine, where it was stored in Solomon's temple. This was the genesis of the Kabbalistic and esoteric knowledge. The Templars bring Sumerian knowledge to Europe. The Sumerian word for royal blood is Graal. So, remind you of anything? Graal. So we can see where we get the words from now. After the capture of Jerusalem in 1099, 9 French knights led by Hugh de Payens and André de Montbard, uncle of the powerful clerics and Bernard, travelled to the Holy Land and formed the Knights Templar. As they knew, the remainder of Solomon's treasure was buried under the temple in the Jerusalem from the accounts handed down by their ancestors. Ostensibly a religious order, Templars spent 9 years excavating under the temple before returning to France with new wealth and knowledge. Solomon's treasure was brought to Europe, so you can see it was handed down. The knowledge was brought from Samaria to Abraham, it was handed down to Isaac, it was handed down to Solomon, who stored it in the Temple Mount under the ground. You can see the Knights Templars found it, they brought it back, it brings us up to modern day. So, this is the chronology of Darwin. The theory of evolution by natural selection is inaccurate because Darwin had no means to gain a clear understanding of the amount of time that had passed since early hominids had started to walk upright, began using tools and developed language. So that's true, he didn't have no knowledge of that. What he did do though is he did come up with a theory that replaced a religious run world. So he made it more of a scientific run world. So that's the good thing of what Darwin gave us. But the theory of evolution wasn't thought up by Darwin. That was thought up by a guy called John Baptist Lamarck 50 years before. And the paperwork for the mechanism of evolution, which was what Darwin thought up, was thought up by Alfred Russel Wallace. And he gave the paperwork to Darwin and said, can you have a look at this for me? See what you think. And Darwin was like, well, this is basically what I'm doing, but this guy's done it all. So he handed it to his friend, Charles Lyell. And what you've got to remember is in those days, Darwin was upper class, and this guy here was lower class, so he was a nothing, he was a nobody. So what they did was they basically put Darwin's name on his paperwork, and then presented it to Charles Lyell at the Linnean Society. And that was put forward as Darwin's work, with basically Alfred Russel Wallace got Darwin's name on it, so he's sort of endorsing it. So, click please.
In the first edition of his book On the Origin of Species, Charles Darwin made a very interesting observation. He said that he could see no difficulty in a race of bears taken to the water, becoming aquatic, and eventually becoming a creature, as he said, as monstrous as a whale. So there you have the idea, bears can turn into whales just given enough time and enough natural selection. Now, in later editions, Darwin removed that claim. He obviously thought better of it and realised it couldn't be substantiated with evidence, so he thought he'd go aquatic. But the interesting thing about him removing that is that the idea that a bear can turn into a whale through natural selection is the very core idea of Darwinism. It's the top and bottom of the Darwinian theory, that one species can turn into another species. And in removing that example, I can't help feeling that Darwin must have had grave reservations about the rest of his theory.
So, not evolution, but adaptation. The word evolution, not actually used by Darwin himself, is pretty vague at best and should be replaced, and you all use it in conjunction with the word adaptation. The theory of adaptation is far more fitting, for one major reason. For something to evolve, it needs to adapt first, and this has to happen fast and in its own lifetime in order for the DNA to be resequenced and passed down. So that means, like, for example, if you have like a person, take a person two identical people. You put one on an athletics track, and he's going to be a long distance runner. He's like does marathons. You take the other person, and you put him as a swimmer. Right? After 10 years, you will see that that person has adapted to being a marathon runner. You know, he would have lost weight, he would have trimmed down, his muscles would have adapted to that distance, and his lungs and everything, he'd be able to do that perfectly. The swimmer would have adapted to swimming. And what happens when you spend a lot of time in water is that swimmer actually puts on body fat. You put on body fat when you spend a lot of time in water. So that athlete will probably get down to about 8%, 6% body fat, the marathon runner, and the swimmer, who would say start off with 15% body fat, would be up to 25. So you can see that the environment dictates what environment we place ourselves in dictates how we are. So that's adaptation. They've adapted to their situation, and if they had children at that time, they would pass that down. That is memorised in their DNA, and that DNA is passed down to their kids. So you can change that over a lifetime. You can adapt to lots of different things. Now you can take that swimmer that's adapted to swimming for 10 years, who's put on that body fat, and you can swap both of these people around. You put a marathon runner into the swimming program now, who's got 6% body fat, and you put the swimmer as a marathon runner now, who's got 25% body fat. You look at them 10 years later, the marathon runner will be up to about 20% body fat and adapted to swimming, and the swimmer would have lost that body fat down to about 10, 8%, and would have adapted to marathon running. So the environment dictates how we are, and that's passed down in our genes, and that's adaptation. That's the only way you can pass it on. When you speak about evolution, they say slow changes over millions and millions of years. There's just not enough time in the universe, I'm sorry, those small changes to take effect the way they say it. It has to happen in our lifetime. A change has to be in your lifetime in order for it to be passed down to the next generation. So that has to happen quick. And because it happens quick like that, there will never be a missing link. Never, never, never. There's absolutely no way you'll ever find a missing link because it does happen that quick. So what they're looking for, this missing link, the evolutionists, is never going to be there. They're never going to find it. So this is where they say we come from. This is our common ancestor. This is Lucy, fossil found 3 million years ago. And if you look at the skeleton, it's a lot smaller than us. She's about 5 foot tall. The rib cage is important because all apes have this funnel-like rib cage and really long arms. They put the shoulders up a bit on here to make them look a bit higher, but they can hang down a bit more. And this is us. This is a modern human. We are completely different to this. Completely different. And this is the chart the evolutionists give us. Monkey, ape, Australopithecine, which is here, which is Lucy. That's what they say. You didn't have apes that walk around like that, and then apes that walk around like that, and then apes that walk around like that. This is rubbish. You either went down on all fours or you walked upright. You didn't have these in-between stages. So these two here, with a human body and an ape head, they don't exist. There's no skeletons that have been found that have got a human body and an ape head. No one's found that. This is rubbish. This is absolute rubbish. This does not exist, these two here. What you have is monkey, ape, Australopithecine, and modern humans. And the difference we have as well to this species here, which is supposed to be our ancestor, is we have two genes in our makeup, which is obviously the genetics is found out. We have the HAR1 gene, which gives us our brain size, and we have the FOXP2 gene, which gives us our speech. And both of these genes here, they are not found in this species of ape or any ape, for a matter of fact. So how's that suddenly appeared in us? It's come from somewhere, but it hasn't evolved from these early primates into us, so it's appeared in us somewhere. And recently geneticists have also found out we have 223 genes that are like nothing else on the planet. Like nothing else. 223 that can't compare to nothing. Because we're all basically made up of the same things. Click please.
Evolution involves change over time. And I have here 5 skulls of 5 different fossil individuals out of about 6,000 fossil individuals that are
So what we see then is change over time in the physical form, in this case brain size and the size of the face. But human evolution involved not only change in the physical form of early humans up to ourselves, but also change in behavior. And so I have some of the stone tools that help show us some of the changes that occurred in the behavior seen in the archaeological remains. So we have the earliest stone technologies known back to a little bit more than 2.5 million years ago. The earliest technologies consisted of basically a broad cobblestone like this, which was battered, and you also have the core. The hammerstone was brought back down on this cobble, and flake scars were made, and what flew off from the cobble itself were the sharp, staying stone flakes, which were really useful for cutting meat off of animal bones, and also maybe whittling a stick. That stick could be used to dig in the ground for roots, tubers, or maybe even deeper into the ground for water during times when things were dry. About 1.5 million years ago, we see that the early humans were able to make really large flakes and to take those flakes and to strike them all the way around, creating a sharp edge all the way around. And this was a really handy tool to carry around with you for a lot of different purposes. This is the oldest known hand axe, and hand axes were around for yet another 1 million years, and it's changed pretty slowly. Well, what we see then, beginning about 500,000 years ago, is that the stone hand axes became smaller and they became more and more refined to the point where they became almost really pieces of art, really beautiful craftsmanship. And then technology kept getting smaller, as you can see these fine blades, and then even the innovation of arrowheads. And arrowheads were great, of course, for killing vast and dangerous prey. And so the history of technology has been pretty much the same ever since, going from big and clunky.
Okay, so what he's trying to tell us, and this is what they go by to the Smithsonian Museum, is all these lot here, they like to think further back in time you go, the more stupid everyone was. So the more stupid the species was, the further back in time. This is absolute rubbish, because if this species here, was flaking off stone flints, you're telling me that it would just take the biggest ones and leave the little ones. And then as we progress further, this species here was flaking off stone flints as well, and then it slowly progressed until this species here, I thought, well, I'll use the tiny one. And this took millions of years for them to work out, yeah, we can use the tiny ones as well. This is absolute rubbish. Of course they used every part of it. When they flagged it off, they took the big bit, they took the little bit, they knew what they used it for. There's no way that took millions of years to work out. They were all doing the same thing. He was flaking off stones, he was doing the same thing, he was doing the same thing, so was he doing the same thing. And then we get to modern humans, and we didn't do that. We build machines and aircraft and weapons and stuff. None of these lot do anything. They're all the same as well. There's not much change in them. The dermal brow, there, the sloping forehead, brain size, not much difference, and then you get modern humans. So this is what they're trying to tell you, we evolve from that to that to that to that. Thing is, these are all the same. This isn't. This is completely different. The bone structure, when you analyse the bone structure here, the bones here are much more robust, rugged. These are a lot stronger than what we are. We're a lot more delicate than all these here. So this is what they like to say. The more further back in time you go, the more stupid you are, and then you slowly come forward. Obviously, I disagree. You know, if you've got the ability to break off flakes, you've got the ability to pick up small bits and big bits. It's not going to take you millions of years to work that out. Okay?
To really small and refined.
So this is, you can go on my website and just click on that, that'll take you to a page where you can download, where you can download Humans Are Not From Earth, a scientific evaluation of the evidence by Dr. Ellis Silver. So this is really good actually, it's really excellent scientific paperwork that he's put together here. And he explains things like why do we get cataracts, why does the sun harm our skin? 220 genes in our human DNA unlike anything from Earth, and our circadian rhythm changes in astronauts from 24 hours to 24.9 hours like Mars, which is unusual as well. So that interesting paper, obviously I can't say much more on it because we've got so much to go through, it's unbelievable. This is Francis Crick. He's the co-discoverer of the DNA double helix. This is our DNA strand here, and when you listen to Francis Crick, he didn't think that life evolved on Earth. He didn't think that. So click.
Francis Crick, the British scientist who helped discover the structure of DNA, believed that human genes could not have evolved by chance.
Crick didn't feel in that period of roughly 600 million years from the formation of the planet down to the time when the planet could first support life, there was enough time for DNA to evolve by accident. It's an enormously complicated molecule. Crick gave this analogy. You would be more likely to assemble a fully functioning and flying jumbo jet by passing a hurricane through a junkyard than you would be to assemble the DNA molecule by chance in any kind of primeval soup in 500 or 600 million years. It's just not possible.
So first life consisted of simple cells. It arrived suddenly and came in two types. So that's unusual as well. If something was evolving on Earth, it would just be one type. It wouldn't be two different types. And we do have two distinct types of bacteria, prokaryotic and eukaryotic, that arrived suddenly on Earth 4.3 billion years ago. So there was nothing before, 4 billion years ago. So 4.3 billion years ago Earth was created, etc. Which is questionable as well, because the way the geologists date the Earth is they use the uranium-lead method. And that is basically the amount of uranium that decays over time turns into lead. So they measure the amount of uranium, they measure the amount of lead, and the date they get from that is 4.3 billion years. So that's the age of our Earth. But what they don't tell you is that same uranium gives off another byproduct called radioactive helium, and basically most of the helium in our atmosphere comes from radioactive decay. When you measure that radioactive helium, that gives you a date for 200,000 years. So, how old is the Earth? Is it 4.3 billion years or is it 200,000 years? So they don't tell you that. They just tell you what they want you to believe. So that is questioned as well. So when someone tells you the age of the Earth, that's just based on someone's opinion. It's not fact. There's no conclusive evidence that it's that old. You know, it's definitely not 6,000 years old. So any creationists, you know, they haven't got what they wanted. It's definitely over 200,000 years old and more billions of years old. Hopefully they'll come up with an accurate dating method one day and we'll find out. So this is Bolivian Angkor Wat dinosaurs. So this is a place in Cambodia called Angkor Wat, and here we can see Stegosaurus, it looks like. So a bit unusual, but how did they know? You know, there wasn't no books around at that time with like pictures of dinosaurs in, so you know, how did they know what it looked like? Did they dig up and find the bones and then, you know, imagine what it looked like with the skin on and stuff? Or did some of them actually survive until modern times, you know, which is a possibility, of course. You know, they say the dinosaurs were wiped out 65 million years ago, but as I said, we can't date everything. These dating methods are not perfect, they're not accurate, so, you know, that asteroid impact probably didn't wipe them off about. Some of them probably survived, you know. And that's why we get things like this. And here we have 65 million year old footprints. And what we have here is, this is a dinosaur footprint, and this is a human footprint, but it's a more modern human footprint, it's not like us. And this is actually fact, it's not a hoax. It was thought it was a hoax, but it's not. This is genuine. They found this under lots of rock strata footprints together. These are like 16, 18 inches big, so it's quite a big human, 8, 9 foot tall, which is basically how big the Annunaki were around now. This is in a petroglyph of a dinosaur found Natural Bridges National Monument in Utah. It's attributed to the Anasazi Indians who lived in the area around 400 AD. So this is a sauropod. So you can see that they must have seen something like this to draw it. They couldn't have made this up from bones. This was something they saw. And there is still legends around the world that something like this survives. In Africa they call it Mokele Omembe. In America, in Lake Champlain, they call it Champ, you know. Obviously the Loch Ness Monster as well, we've heard of that. So here's some more of the footprints that they found. This is a dinosaur footprint here, and this is an early human footprint, but I think it's an Annunaki footprint basically, because they were on Earth before us. This is the Floxy River, Glenrose, Texas, and here you can see the trail. The dino footprints going off. Click the video, please.
My reaction was one of shock. I heard of human footprints being found in this locale on the Biloxi near Glenrose, Texas, but I was rather skeptical. And here, after removing actual rock layers, the team and I excavated a series of dinosaur footprints. And 18½ inches from one of those dinosaur footprints, we excavated a 16-inch human footprint. We excavated 12 footprints in series. And when you find a trail with left, right basic strike, the right distance apart, then you have to interpret this as belonging to humankind.
It's been claimed the Biloxi River footprints are a hoax carved into the limestone bedrock as a tourist attraction.
Well, we found trails leading under limestone ledges and actually removed the limestone ledges one slab of rock at a time. And we found that both the dinosaur footprints and the trail of human footprints continued under the rock ledges. This evidence is real.
So there you go. This is obviously scientists ignore this. Some scientists don't, but things like this can't be ignored. You have to address it. You know, if it doesn't fit in with what you're teaching or fit in with what's been taught, then you know we've gone wrong somewhere. Something's gone wrong. So we have to look at this. And here we see sauropods in an ancient Sumerian cylinder seal. So we can see here quite clearly this is a sauropod. Again, so maybe some of them have survived to modern day, or maybe we just go back a lot longer than we thought. And this is a letter from a DNA expert. I normally read this out myself, but I've put the video in this time. I just think, you know, out of respect for Lloyd Pye, I think I should play the video and let him read out the letter, because it was addressed to him. So press the video.
And he says, "Dear Mr. Pye, I agree with your conclusions and will give you a few hints, if you wish, as a DNA deep throat. First, look up the huge discontinuities between man and the various apes for whole mitochondrial DNA, genes for the Y extractor, and human Y chromosomes, among others. Regarding number 3, the chromosomes, I refer you to K.B. Smith's 1987 study titled Repeated DNA Sequences of the Human Y Chromosome. It says most human Y chromosome sequences so far examined do not have homologs, which are similar sequences, on the Y chromosomes of other primates. Human female DNA does look somewhat ape-like, but not the male Y. This means that if we are a crossbred hybrid species, as you contend, me, the cross had to be between a female ape-like creature, a creature of the earth, as the Sumerian said, and a male person from elsewhere, as I also contend. He goes on to say, what the evolutionists do is find certain genes which look very similar between man and ape. Then they make a tree of descent while ignoring those huge impassable abysses of difference elsewhere. Also, by certain methods of DNA dating, one can tell that numerous genes have been recently added to the human genome. If workers in my field were to say such things openly, we would be ostracized, as I also contend.
and forced to live in a tent. Any work along these lines would be rejected without any form of appeal. So what can we do? Sincerely, DNA deep throat. Now,
that was a letter from 5 minutes. Okay, from a break of 5 minutes. So that was a letter from a DNA expert who didn't want to give his name, but he wanted to, let people know what the facts are. So what evidence backs up the Sumerian texts? So we have the FOXP2 gene, no origins in apes, the HAR1 gene, no origins in apes. We have 2% unknown DNA and 223 genes that are like nothing on Earth either. Knowledge of the celestial bodies, the solar system, this is all in the Sumerian text. They had full knowledge of the solar system. They knew all the planets before we even found out about some of them in the 1940s. The fusion of 46 to 48 to 46 chromosomes, that can't happen by nature. It's not something that happens in nature. You can only have that. See, apes have 48 chromosomes, we have 46. So the Annunaki had 46 chromosomes. So when we were created, 2 chromosomes were fused. So the information from 2 chromosomes took up the space of 1. That's why we have 46 chromosomes. The Earth was called the 7th planet because it's the planet that when you're coming in from the solar system, the outer planet, you're counting inwards, and that's correct. It's not the third rock from the sun. You don't count outwards from the sun. I know we do, but when you're coming into a solar system, it's not the sun that you see first, it's the outer planet. So we're the 7th planet, so they're right. The mitochondrial DNA signature, this is what they dated recently. The geneticists said, right, we can test the mitochondrial DNA to find out exactly when we come back, how far we go back. So the anthropologists said, great, so we will find out whether we go back 4 million years or 6 million years. Yeah, we'll find out. So they tested the mitochondrial DNA, it came back 250,000 years. That's how far back we go. So when that's got to be wrong, it's got to be further than that. We've got to go further back than that. No, test it again, test it in other labs, 250,000 years. Exactly what the Sumerian tablets say. We were created 250,000 years ago as a slave race. And that's what our mitochondrial DNA says. The mitochondrial DNA is basically passed down from female to female. So we can trace our ancestry back to one woman in Africa. That's how accurate this mitochondrial DNA is. And that's exactly where the Annunaki said we were created, in South Africa. Which is where they set up a lot of mines there after they made basically Iraq, they moved to South Africa. But that's where we were created, 250,000 years ago. Now our nuclear DNA points to being billions of years old. So we have 2 conflicting DNAs. Our nuclear DNA is billions of years old, billions. But our mitochondrial DNA is only 250,000 years ago. So we're a hybrid, we're a hybrid race. Because both these DNA should match if we evolve from something. They should both match, both be the same age. So this is habitable planets in our solar system. So if we look, Mars was once like the Earth. Mars looked like this. You could live on Mars. It's only been like this for about 10, 20,000 years. So a long time ago, when you came into our solar system, you would see an Earth and you would see another small Earth like it. And you've got Europa and you've got Titan here as well. All planets that are potentially habitable, these 2 in the future. Mars, if you terraformed it a little bit, it would be habitable in about 50 to 100 years. These are habitable planets recently found outside our solar system. So you can just see the amount of planets there are that they're finding just in a small section of the sky. These are all Earth-like planets. Look at these. This one, all of these planets here. This one's a new one down here. All of these are all habitable planets. So it's just incredible.
The images reveal that the red planet was anything but.
One of the things that shocked people in 2004 when NASA and JPL released these photos was this wasn't the dead planet that we've been led to believe with a brown sky and brown dusty surface. That when you look at this bluish sky, and when you
Mars skulls and skeletal remains, so you can see these are NASA photos. You can find them in the archives, taken by the Spirit rover. And if we went to NASA and we asked for those pictures, and you saw the high resolution version, you would see that that is a skull. It's undeniably a skull. You can see the eye sockets here, the nose bit, where the jaws bit, the missing here, cranium. So, what's that doing on Mars? Obviously, so like the Sumerian texts say, you know, they had a base there, they had a base on the moon, and they came to Earth as well. That's the Great Pyramid. In 2006, Dr. Michael Barsoom of Utrecht University and colleagues found an early form of poured geopolymer concrete was used to build the Great Pyramid, upsetting the age-old myth that it was constructed of limestone blocks. This poured concrete was 3 times the hardness of currently used concrete. British engineer Christopher Dunn has theorised that the Great Pyramid, far from being a tomb, was actually an energy-generating and delivery device, attesting to a empirical, unknown technology. And I'm part Egyptian. My uncle was an Egyptologist, so I spent a lot of time in Egypt. And when you go there, you've been inside. Anyone been inside the Great Pyramid? Anyone here? No, never. No one see it. When you go there, the blocks are massive. They are huge. They are, let's say, from the wall to where I am, and about that height, where the red dot is. That's the average stone block, and there's 2.5 million of them that make up the Great Pyramid. In the middle, they are granite. On the outside, they are like this poured, like they say, this poured polymer. They call it limestone. It's not. It's a concrete, and it's not tomb. When you go there, like Christopher Dunn said, you can see machine marks and everything. When you go into the Cairo Museum, you look at it, you can see machine marks. It's clearly done with power tools. Clearly, it wasn't chiseled down with copper little chisels that would not make a mark in it. They used power tools. So this is inside the pyramid shafts. Here you've got the, they call the King's Chamber. You've got the 2 shafts coming off. 2 shafts coming off here. Now, in the 1800s, there was a British archaeologist called Harold Weiss, and he was looking at the pyramid, and he was being funded by obviously the museum in England. And they said, right, listen, you've not found nothing, we're going to cut your funding soon. So what he done was he drew a cartouche of what the King Khufu is, just above the King's Chamber in these vaults here, and that's why they think the pyramid was built by Khufu. It was Harold Weiss who faked a cartouche. And when they tested this, a couple of German guys went in there and they took a sample, which they weren't supposed to, but they took a sample of this cartouche, took the ink and they radiocarbon dated it, and it's only 60 years old. So it hasn't been there for thousands of years. It was done by Harold Weiss. And obviously, people like that do fake stuff so they can continue getting funded, which is a shame. So inside, I'll just go back a minute. So inside, in the 80s, another German engineer called Rudolf Gattenbrink, he made a machine that went up the King's Chamber. They were going to explore the shaft to see what happens. So they filmed this, they went up the shaft, and what they found was, they found this stone slab here with 2 alloy clasps sticking out of it. Not copper, it's alloy, 2 alloy clasps. So they filmed this, you've seen it on TV when they set the camera up there. So what they did was, next time they did another program, they asked that Harry's last, they carried on with it, yeah, come on, we can make a program out of it. So they made a program out of it, and they drilled through a hole, and they stuck a camera through there, and what they found on the other side was these clasps here went round, and they were eroded. So they were eroded like the electrical current was going through. So at some time in that history, an electrical current was going through these things to make it erode this way. But what also they found was they found some markings on the floor here. And this is a large image. That's not Egyptian. That's not found anywhere. These are not Egyptian markings. So that is inside the Great Pyramid. That is proof alone that the Egyptians did not build the Great Pyramid. That has been there a lot longer. And I contest that it's a power plant. And like if you came to a planet, you would have to establish a power plant, wouldn't you? We've got power plants at powerhouse cities all over the world. You have to have a power plant yourself. Take the image, please.
Engineer Chris Dunn believes the answer can be found by further examination of the shafts in what some call the Queen's Chamber, where traces of zinc and hydrochloric acid have been discovered.
I believe the chemical coming in through the northern shaft was hydrogenated zinc, and the other chemical coming through the southern shaft and into the chamber was dilute hydrochloric acid. These are actually seen on the chamber walls.
Dunn suggests that the two chemicals were poured down through the shafts and then mixed together inside the Queen's Chamber, triggering combustion.
This vessel represents the Queen's Chamber. Into the tubes were run to pour hydrogenated zinc and then hydrochloric acid. When you bring these two liquids together, a chemical reaction occurs, and the product of that chemical reaction is hydrogen. And you can see the vapor, the hydrogen, escaping through the chimney. There you have the reaction.
Dunn speculates that the hydrogen gas traveled from the Queen's Chamber into the King's Chamber. Then, the vibrations from the subterranean pool energized the hydrogen atoms into a microwave energy beam.
The evidence that indicates the use of hydrogen can be found in the King's Chamber. There is a shaft in the King's Chamber that has dimensions of 8.4 by 4.8, which would be suitable for a waveguide for a laser or microwave amplification through stimulating emission radiation. And from there, we can actually propose many different ideas of what they did with it.
So that was Chris Dunn. I've spoken to Chris a few times about, the Great Pyramid. Like I said, when you go there and you stand inside the thing, you go inside it, you know that this thing was built like a machine. It was never a tomb. You can see it for yourself when you go there. This thing had a function. This is Baalbek in Lebanon. It's the Temple of Jupiter because the Romans built on top of it. These are the largest blocks that they use in the Temple Mount as well. The large blocks, they're called the Triton. And you can see here how big they are. We don't have a crane in the world that can lift that up or move it, or 10 cranes that could move that. We don't have anything in the world that could move that. These blocks are so heavy we don't even know how much they weigh. They're over 1,000 tons. Click the image, please.
When we first began to work on the Wet Novel site, we thought we had an old site. This is back in '66. And we thought it was perhaps 20,000 years old. And at that time, that was considered a very old age for the site. We did what they call radiometric dates, which gives an actual date range. And we used two different methods to do that. One was using uranium atoms, another one was using little silicon crystals. When we finally got the dates and all the different methods we used to date it, it came out to be 250,000 years old. To tell you the truth, I would have been happy with a 20,000-year-old date. It would have made my career. It was very old for the time, but it wasn't so old that it was that controversial. People can take 20,000-year steps. They can't take steps that are over 200,000 years at one time. And I was rather naive. I thought, okay, we've got something big here, but I'm just going to stick with the date. We've got the information, we've got the facts, let's get the facts out and go on from there. And I didn't realize it was going to ruin my whole career.
So that's basically what happens to an archaeologist that tells the truth. Someone that tells the truth that has an actual date of these things that are over 200,000 years old, which when you look at it, you can see the wear and tear on it. There's no way they're like 10,000 years old wear and tear, they still look brand new. you know, with these kind of rocks. They are so hard, these rocks, you know, they're like diorite, granite. They just don't wear that well, you know. So that's what happens. That's just an example. You've got an archaeologist like that tells the truth. She gets the sack and gets ostracised from the fraternity, and the person that tells the lies, yeah, it's just 10,000 years old. Yeah, that's what they can't go back any further. They just can't. But all these sites here, Ollantay Tambo, Peru, if you knew how to build this is so sophisticated, putting these blocks together. Don't you think, if it was recent, like 10,000 years ago, it would be written down and passed on to the next generation? The reason that we don't have any knowledge of how these were built is because they are so old, there is no information available. They are so old. And they're just incredible how these are made. We couldn't do this today with all our modern technology. We could not do this today. And these rocks here, they are fused together with a high heat source, so they're like welded together. They're put in place and they're absolutely flat. They fit flush. You can't fit a piece of paper or a razor blade in between the joint. And they're massive as well. They're huge. Click the video.
Whoever built Tiwanaku came up with a very ingenious method for holding together the huge stones which they used to build the site. They carved a groove in the edge, and into this groove they would pour a molten alloy, which later hardened into a staple. What I find amazing here is that to move to each site where the staple was needed, they had to have something like a portable smelting plant to maintain this metal in a molten state.
Series of metal clamps reveal the level of technology far beyond their time.
The antiquity and the technological sophistication of Tiwanaku should make each and every one of us fully question the origins of civilization.
So he's talking about Tiwanaku, that's in Peru.
That's the end work on the way
It's not far away from Ollantay Tambo, it's not far away from Teotihuacan. It's this is the Temple of the Condor as well. You can see these massive, huge blocks, and they are soldered together with like a high heat source. And they have these clamps as well. And the same clamps are used in Egypt as well. They use clamps there as well. So they have the same technology, whoever was doing this. And like I said, I think they're so old, I think they go back hundreds of thousands of years. I don't think they're tens of thousands of years old. I think they're like the Annunaki said. And the reason they were built so big, there's only one reason why you build something out of massive stone blocks like that, and that's to keep yourself safe, isn't it? And to keep something very large out. So I think they came to the planet where there was a few dinosaurs running around, and they wanted to protect themselves. That's why they built so big. Otherwise, why not use like bricks like we use, you know? They were keeping something out. And here, this is the opposite side of where they built this wall. This is where they cut some of the blocks out, and you can see these are cut out, and the surface is vitrified. Vitrified means when you've used a high heat source, and it becomes as smooth as a mirror. So something like glass, that's like glass when you touch it. Here we've got a section from the top, and you can see here crisscross saw marks to take the block out. So after it's been cut, they cut the bottom bit. So God knows what they've used here to cut in here. Then we go close up here, then we go again. Undeniable evidence of machinery. You can't get underneath that block with a little chisel. There's no way you can do it. There's no way you can cut that big block out. That is a machine that's cut that out. And it's done it quick, it's done it efficiently, you know. For you to do that with a chisel would take you probably about 50 years. You'd never get it done. So here, this is just an example of today how much trouble we have moving a small block. So this is levitated mass. This is the stone that they brought from the quarry to put in Los Angeles Capitol Museum. It's 340-ton granite megalith. So it's a small one compared to some of the things that they built with. £68,000, and you see how much they're moving that.
Workers from 100 utility crews, a 1.4 million pound crane, and a 44-axle tractor-trailer rig with over 2,400 horsepower are needed to move the rock.
It's going to require hydraulically jacking the boulder up off the ground, which is incredibly difficult in itself. Building steel girders underneath it, placing 208 tires underneath those steel girders, having one power unit pulling it and one pushing it, and still after all that only achieving about 5 miles an hour.
So that's today. That's how we move blocks today. You can see the massive utility crew moving that block. There's no way you had that bunch of guys with like ropes and pulleys pulling something on wooden rollers. Wooden rollers would just go splat because of the weight of it. They were using technology here as a comparison. So this is levitating mass. This is the one you just saw moving. This is the Western stone. This is what the type of stones we use to build the Temple Mount. You know, where the mosque is on. So all these stones here, lots of them, we used to build the Temple Mount. This is the Ramesseum, big statue in Egypt, and this is the biggest blocks in the world, the Trilithon in Baalbek in Lebanon. These are huge. So levitate mass, 68,000 pounds. The Western stone here is 1.2 million pounds. The Ramesseum, 2 million pounds, and the Trilithon, 4.8 million pounds. So you saw how much trouble that great big rig with 2 engines moving 5 miles an hour that. What would you use to move that? We can't move that. We have nothing that can move that. We have nothing that can move that. We have nothing that can move that. We can just about move that. So there was a high technology used. It's a technology we haven't got today. And that's it. This takes to the end. So, any questions? I'll be happy to answer to the best of my ability if you've got anything to ask. So fire away.
That was really good, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. It's not such a nice thing. Sorry, I had to charge you $5, but it costs a lot of money. But I'd like to arrange like a meeting place where everyone can come to once a month. So it don't cost anyone anything. We can all sit down and talk about it because it is important. It is the most important subject, I feel, in the world, because I think when people find out more about this, it will replace all the religions. And like I said, all those religions divide us all. They cause all the wars. There's not one single religion that is not responsible for lying to you, persecution, death and murder. That's what they're all about. So this, if you understand this, you understand where we come from. We come from a warring race. These are warring people, the Annunaki. They're not nice. They didn't like humans. Only the guy that created us, Enki, and the ones that had families with the human slaves, they're the only one that liked the humans, and they saved us from being wiped out by the other Annunaki. This is what happened. This is what happened in the end. The guys above, they got fed up with the other guys mingling with the human slaves. We went underground. We stayed on the ground for a long time, which is why I think it explains we're not used to the sun, because we were mining and we spent a lot of time underground to hide from the Annunaki who were hunting us down because they wanted to get rid of their creation, and that's it. And if you watch a video, I watched something recently, but I'm not too sure on the truth about it, but it's a film called The Fourth Kind. And it's based on like some alien abductions in northern Alaska. I don't know how accurate it is, but I can play the video quickly so you can watch it. It's interesting because it does say something about the Annunaki. And if it's true, they are still here. They are still around. They have still got something to do with the earth. So let me see if I can find it. Yeah.
Do you believe in the Greys?
The Greys, yeah, of course I do. Yeah, I think, you know, if you speak to some of the whistleblowers that are talking in the Disclosure Project, you know, the Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project, he's got so many scientists, ex-CIA, you know, people that work for the government coming forward and disclosing evidence and stuff. They say that we've been visited by over 57 different species of humanoid that visited planet Earth. And there's loads of different species of humanoid out there, and that seems to be the template for intelligence of hominid. And they're all over the place. They inhabit planets throughout the universe next to us, the universe next to that, the universe next to that. It's endless, and I think life is a byproduct of the universe. You know, like I said, the building blocks float around freely in space. You know, and I think life is just transported from planet to planet. You know, that's how I think it happens. It's part of the universe. Life is part of it. It's everywhere. You only have to look at our planet and see the different forms of life that we've got. Then you go to the ocean, you've got different forms of life there, and then you've got life right down the bottom that you never think could exist, you know, near those thermal vents and the pressure.
Would you think it's keeping it secret? Do you think it's the NSA?
Well, you know, I think a lot of the governments, the people that run the governments, who are involved in the governments, they are all from different religions, and I think the religions are so powerful, they don't want that to crumble. You know, because that would be the end of them. You know, I mean, like I said in the beginning, once this comes out and people know about it, it's going to destroy everything. I mean, that's probably why the Pope made a statement, I think it was about 4 years ago, to say that, you know, if you believe in aliens, it doesn't matter. You know, you can still believe in God, because God must have created the aliens. You know, that's what he